See how you're recommended. The real reason why conspiracy theories work. Decide to watch the 5-minute video. But then after that, one titled, Proving the Earth is Flat, is about to play in 30 seconds and you think, I gotta watch that. And then rapidly click on it. Next thing you know, you've wasted 2 hours of your life watching utterly useless, yet very entertaining videos. But how? There are approximately 300 hours of video uploaded every minute to YouTube. How does it know that this video of Joe Jonas dancing to single ladies from 9 years ago will keep me entertained? Maybe you're more responsible than me, but I'm sure you've talked to Siri or Alexa before, used facial recognition to take a selfie, or been bombarded by ads by that one time you searched up Instant Call on Amazon.
All these phenomena utilize something called machine learning. What is machine learning? Machine learning is a subset of the much more ambitious goal of artificial intelligence, or AI. Simply put, machine learning, or ML, is giving computers the ability to learn without being explicitly programmed to do so. In other words, it's just not telling it if X would do Y, but giving the ability to make decisions on its own. And this makes sense in this position. I'm sure no random programmer had to code 1.3 billion YouTube users' recommended feeds, and even if they did, I bet the ML algorithm did it much better. So how does machine learning work exactly? Truth be told, it's quite complicated, but let's get a simple example to get a vague grasp. Suppose we have a bunch of fruit.
Fruit delivery!
How convenient! We have a bunch of mangoes and apples. So, let's write a machine learning algorithm to classify between these two. You see, the funny thing about machines is, what's really easy for humans is really difficult for machines. I'll show you. Hey Shadiga, what's this?
Mango.
What's this?
A yummy apple.
Hey Alexa, what's this here?
This year is 2019.
See what I mean? Okay, so the first step in machine learning algorithms is to gather our data. So how do we gather data from a bunch of fruit here? We do this by collecting data from aspects called
Features.
We'll use two features for this example. One, let's use the circumference of the fruit, and the other should be
The color of the fruit.
Great! So we'll collect all of our data by measuring the color and the circumference of all these fruit and then identify whether they're apple or mangoes. And then we'll graph this on a model. For this model, we'll use a simple two-dimensional linear chart as each feature representing an axis. The diameter on the x and color on the y. As you can see in this simple example, that there's a very clear distinction between mangoes and apples, and a line can be drawn to separate the two. Meaning, anything on this side of the line will be mangoes, and anything on this side will be apples. This line right here is called a hyperplane in a support vector machine. We'll get more into that later. So obviously this is an arbitrary, pretty simple, silly example, but it's this type of classification technique in which Gmail uses to detect fraud, or which algorithms use to detect fraud financial transactions. But what if you weren't identifying between apples or mangoes, but classifying whether a brain had Alzheimer's or not? Alzheimer's is a type of dementia. It affects 5.7 million Americans and there's no cure. It's the 6th leading cause of death in adults worldwide, and it's predicted to cause $1 trillion by 2050. Sounds pretty awful, right? So how can machine learning help us here? Because believe it or not, humans can't do everything on their own.
What? That's impossible!
Well, I'll tell you how machine learning is going to help. Early detection of Alzheimer's is essential, and one study found that a new method of CAD, computer-assisted diagnosis using machine learning, is very helpful. The old method, called ROI, was extremely ineffective as it only focused on 3 regions of the brain, and it had to be done manually or semi-manually. On top of that, it required prior knowledge, accuracy depended on the examiner, and it was just really difficult. Imagine if our tests were like that. Now, with this new CAD, an impressive 30 different Alzheimer's related regions were found in the brain, and with a whopping 92.36% accuracy. Sounds incredible, right? Okay, so for the rest of the video, I don't want to bore you with just straight statistics of machine learning in medicine, but I'm going to walk you through techniques and show how it really applies. Let's go.
Spurthi said, please come to the doctor's appointment immediately.
Oh, I guess that's me. I gotta go. Maybe I'll see some of that cool machine learning in action. Let's start with support vector machines, or SVMs, a popular technique in machine learning primarily used for classifications. It's also the most common approaches for breast cancer diagnosis. So let's use a cancer example. Say we want to write an SVM to classify between benign and malignant tumors. For simplistic purposes, let's take a 2-dimensional model in which your axes will be our features, which will help us classify our data. Let's pick uniformity of cell size and bare nuclei. The thing about SVMs, we need labeled data to start out with. So as we plot our data, along with identifying the uniformity of cell size and the bare nuclei, we also need to identify whether it's benign or malignant, done by color here. So, after we've plotted all the data, as you can see, there's a clear distinction between benign and malignant tumors, and we can separate them by drawing a line here. This is called a hyperplane. But, as you can see in the graph visually, there's several different hyperplanes I could have drawn. Why this one right here? Well, if we draw a line through the closest data points, known as support vectors, the distance between them is a margin. And your most optimal hyperplane will be that right in the middle of the largest margin. So, here the hyperplane is between my maximum margin, and it is equidistant between each support vector. The distance between these two is labeled as D+, and the distance between these two is identified as D-, which is hopefully not the grade I will get on these presentations. After I've divided my data with my hyperplane, I can clearly distinguish between what is benign and what is malignant, making any future data points easy to classify. Now, this is a simple example with 2 dimensions. The great thing about SVMs is that they're extremely versatile, being able to use across a number of dimensions, using a little something called the kernel trick.
You mean this yummy popcorn from the kernel?
Not that type of kernel, sorry.
Aww.
Well, although we're not making popcorn in this type of machine learning, it's extremely useful as SVM techniques have been used to predict stroke, and in one study have had a 99.51% accuracy in breast cancer diagnosis. Our next ML technique is decision tree, and as you could probably guess from its name, its structure represents that of a tree, or rather an upside down tree. Literally, the initial node is called a root node, the middle are called internal nodes, and the last nodes are called, you guessed it, leaf nodes. Each of these nodes represents a possible outcome, and they can either be numerical or categorical. For example, suppose we want to write a decision tree for whether a person has heart disease. Let's make a roof node, are you above the age of 50? And then it will go into 2 outcomes, which is either yes or no, leading to 2 internal nodes. So let's suppose one of those internal nodes asks, do you eat McDonald's every day? and yes or no are the two possible outcomes leading to our leaf nodes. And then if answer to whether you eat McDonald's every day is yes, we can have a leaf node there that says probably you do have heart disease. Last but not least, we have artificial neural networks, or ANN. Admittedly, one of the more complicated algorithms, but nonetheless my favorite. It yields many benefits. Like its name, artificial neural networks mimic the structure of the neurons in your brain, but instead of it being like a neuron accepting and releasing electrical signals, artificial neurons takes in data and outputs data. A little something like this. The data is first fed into the input layer. Then it goes through some hidden layers, which it does some calculations. Then it may go through another hidden layer, where some more calculations are done. Then finally it goes through the output layer, where the classification is made.
9.
So that was the general gist of how it works. In a medical perspective, say we want an artificial neural network to detect cancer. Our input layer would be features, things such as clump thickness, cell size, etc. Then it goes through a bunch of these hidden layers, and the output layer would be our diagnosis. ANNs are used widely across the medical field, from detecting Parkinson's disease to cardiac arrhythmia to dermatological disorders. But it seems kind of vague, doesn't it? In comes information and out magically a diagnosis. The answer lies in these hidden layers. And honestly, the connections and calculations between them is pretty complicated. Let's just say a lot of math, addition, subtraction, and weights and biases are applied. I'll save you the math for now. But this sparks some sort of curiosity, doesn't it? Because the thing with neural networks, while the connection between two neurons may be understood, a cluster, maybe with an explanation, layers and layers of these neurons becomes incomprehensible, even for humans. And that's the type of stuff needed to make all these diagnoses. And that's the great thing about algorithms, is that they can piece things humans cannot, especially when it comes to diagnoses. There have been studies in which ANNs have performed up to 5% more accurate than human experts when detecting cancers. And machine learning in medicine overall can improve accuracy up to 25%. Pretty cool, isn't it? So great, all these techniques of machine learning in medicine. What's the point of it? Well, let's look at this from an evolutionary perspective. So, machine learning is helping us eradicate some of the greatest diseases today, such as cancer, and that too in early diagnosis, which is essential for their survival. Breast cancer survivor rates from early to late stages drops for 10 to 15%. Machine learning has also made landslides in detecting and therefore curing Alzheimer's disease and sepsis, which is increasing their survival rate, dampening the effect this epidemic has on humanity. So, with the help of ML, if we're able to erase these epidemics in society today, what would that mean? Would that mean the old is gone and some new pandemic would arise? And would ML would assist us in eradicating that too? Something to think about. Or another way it would affect evolution is we become more connected to machines. Literally, DARPA is already developing insect cyborgs, and bionic arms have been successfully developed, controlled by thought. Oh, I didn't see you there. So far in this video, you've seen all the incredible applications of machine learning and how it has the potential to save millions of lives. But let's step back and look at this from a different perspective. But not literally, because I don't want to get up. So far, it's been all the nitty-gritty technical aspects of exactly how machine learning works in medicine. But will it become part of our feared future in which AI takes over all of our jobs, even that of researchers and doctors? Well, it may seem like that at times. I beg to differ. Because no matter how complicated these algorithms might seem, trust me, your body is even more complex. Each individual and their anatomy is unique, something you can't classify as easily as spam emails. Because medicine, unlike machine learning, isn't just calculations and predictions, but it's also based on the love and compassion doctors have with their patients. So no matter how immensely machine learning can help in medicine, it will never replace.